right, good morning. Welcome to FM Corner. I'm Danny Koontz. Today's episode, as always, on FM Corner is brought to you by Windy City Equipment. Certainly appreciate their sponsorship and the ability to be able to provide these for you. Today, my guest is Rich Hipp. Rich is the CEO of SLM Facility Solutions Nationwide. Rich, thank you so much for joining me today.
Danny, it's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Let's start with, as we always do, kind of talk a little bit about your career. Kind of where did it start to how did you end up where you are today?
Well, Danny, I had the privilege of working right out of college. I was going to night school, trying to finish up my college, and a local company was hiring. I didn't see a career there. I just saw it as a job to get me through school. And what's interesting about that is my very first job with them was in the maintenance department. And then I fast forward to today, and I'm leading a facilities maintenance company. And but the full circle started with a company called Southco, and there's a common theme throughout my career, and that has been having the privilege to work with privately held family businesses. Southco at the time, back in date myself now, this is in the 80s, so I started in the maintenance department there, and just through hard work and dedication, I wanted to make money and get through college. And they saw something in me, and the harder I worked, the more opportunity they provided. It was a family business that really focused on, at the time, globalization. They were expanding, not only throughout the U.S., but overseas. And I moved from the maintenance department into product development and mold maintenance, and got involved. Then they said, "Hey, if you go full time, we'll pay for your college." I'm like, whoa, Mom didn't raise a fool. Let's go. And it was just a wonderful experience. The company was growing. I was growing with it. The more I put in, the more they invested in me, and vice versa. I got a great opportunity to then be in between our customers and our operations through customer service, technical customer service. I moved out with my bride, and now we're married 32 years, so I'm dating myself again. But we moved out to the Midwest, and I was in field sales. So really understanding the customer voice. And as we were growing, we were a hardware company, so it's latches, fasteners, but it's a lot of standard products and custom products through all industries. And I got the opportunity to move back to the corporate office in the Philadelphia area, where I was born and raised, to get into product development from a product management point of view. And so now we're talking about technology investments, pricing, training, everything that goes into building out a product line, which then fast forward into general management and running businesses that were aligned by industry. And then the highlight of my career at that company was to lead their Asia Pacific division. So my wife and 3 daughters, we moved to Hong Kong, and there I was leading a team of about 1,500 people across all of Asia Pacific for 5 years. And it was just a wonderful growth experience for me. And I know I gave back to the company as well, but I'm so proud about the run that we had. When we repatriated back in 2013, it was my first opportunity to take on a CEO role. And it was in the recycling and refurbishment of electronics. And again, family business. This time it was a large family company out of Helsinki, Finland. And so I ran that business for 3 years. It took me into the Chicago area for a majority of that time. And for personal reasons, just being away from the family as much as I was, I really wanted to get back to the roots of Philly. I was on the board of directors for 2 privately held companies at the time in Philly, and they were in transition, looking to sell their organizations. I stepped in as the acting CEO in one of them to help that transition. And then I found myself leading a family business in Philadelphia for the manufacturing and design of specialty tape. That was through COVID. That was a real lesson learned in terms of how you manage through a manufacturing company in during the COVID time. we were blessed by getting on to some contracts for government masks and things that really kept that business not only afloat but growing. The family members, the owner, decided that he wanted to, after COVID, when we brought it back and really did a great job there, wanted to sell that company. And that led me to SLM. And SLM is not for sale, and that's a good thing for me because that's not what I want to be doing. I really want to be back engaged with a family business that looks to the long term. It is a family business in transition. Susan, our founder, is now on the board of directors, and her daughter is now second generation. So it's a woman-owned family business, and I'm proud to represent them today.
It's a great company. Susan Daywitt's a longtime friend of mine, going back over 20 years. And
That's wonderful. Thank you.
we actually, the funny story is we met registering at a hotel in Vegas, and we happened to be standing in line side by side, and that's how we met because we were way like 20th and 21st in line, and we just started talking. And out of that, she served on the board and stuff like that around the same time as I did, and
Okay.
became really good friends for a long time. It's
That's wonderful.
funny, most people that I talk to, and your story parallels that. I've yet to have anybody that said, you know, when I grew up, I wanted to be a facilities person or I wanted to be a vendor that supported facilities. Nobody ever says that, never. And
Right.
so the streak is still going. Everybody's like, I was in a job, I did this, I started, and all of a sudden an opportunity opened up and I took it. And I think
That's
that
right.
speaks volumes for that. From
That's
your
right.
vantage point at SLM, what do you see as the most critical gaps in how facilities are managed across multi locations?
That's a good question. That's a question really that's I don't even know if it's just related to the restaurant space. It's really about, when you're looking at multiple locations and brands and you're growing, it's what are we doing to streamline the process? What are we doing to optimize the process? What are we doing to consolidate, to get leverage, right? And when you're doing that, and especially when you're compounding the fact that growth also comes with turnover, and sometimes there's processes that don't get passed on to the next guy or the next woman that's
Sure.
in line to take it on. So it's those kind of things that I think are the most critical gaps that form that companies really need to focus on. And that's where companies like SLM, we're seeing the benefit of those challenges because our focus is being in the middle, really understanding with experts, how does this work? How can it work better? And how could we help consolidate and leverage it? And being right in the middle between the customer and what they need on the FM side and the vendor
Mhm.
side. So I think those are the big challenges. The other thing is, in many cases, and this isn't about hiding the hockey puck. I think it's just a lack of visibility with data, right? And in business, I've learned my whole career, what gets measured gets done, and without the data to support it, we're just talking. And in some cases, what I say and what you say might not we might be thinking we're talking the same language, but we're seeing it differently. So how are we measuring results and how are we sharing those results? And I think the biggest challenge we have as organizations especially in the restaurant space, it's all about the customer experience. So I think we all need to start focusing more on how do we measure that and how are we contributing to the success of that.
Sure.
And that when we fill that gap, I think we're all winning.
Well, and I think a big part of that, and I know I used to do this, I don't know if everybody does anymore, but we had yearly visits with our major vendors and sat down across the table and said, okay, let's talk. And I would say from the restaurant side, what do we do that hinders you from doing the job? What are we doing? What are we not doing correctly? What would you change? What has someone in operations came to you and said, in my area, this works really well? And does it? And if it does, we ought to be doing it everywhere. Let's change the process of what we're doing. But have those conversations and let your vendor partners speak to you about what you need to do to help them. Because it's a two-way street, always has been, you know,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
communicate that so that they can deliver better and then support them. That's the other part to help them. Or in Ruby's day, I would look at, you talked about data. I had 900 restaurants. Well, I couldn't keep up with 900. So I would say, send me the 100 locations that have the most service calls last year. Just give them to me. Tell me how many and send them to me. And let me look at them. And we'll try to find trends. Either the restaurant's really old, it's starting to break down. We're going to have to do some things. Maybe I have a manager in the restaurant who's a little, his finger is twitchy, wanting to
Mhm.
call in everything versus, working 3 or 4 items at a time to get them fixed, whatever that may be. There's lots of different reasons why. But let's take a look at it and start figuring it out or do something like that. And the only way you're going to do that is get the data, that shows you what's going on.
I think another point that you made is so critical, and sometimes it's just overlooked. Um, we have one point of contact within, say, the restaurant. And if you're on the vendor side, you have that one point of contact. But sometimes that one point of contact doesn't know exactly what the finance team is looking for, or maybe what the operational executive is looking for. And having all the right stakeholders at the table when issues are happening to really understand what are you really trying to accomplish and how can we do that. And it just happened to us recently, simple, on third party platforms, and the issuing of work orders and just getting the right people in the room. It was fixed immediately, but for like 2 months it became a major issue, right? And so it's just getting the right people in the room and not being afraid to say, I don't know, let me
Yeah.
let me go get this person, or I need my IT person or my finance person on the call with us. And then at SLM, what we're trying to do is line up our cross-functional team with our customers' cross-functional team so that we truly bring value from the beginning of the process to the very end. It's not
Sure.
just issuing the work order and getting the job done. It's how it's done from the very start to the very back end, and even all the way through to the billing. So I think
Sure.
that's really important.
Well, and I think as a facility manager, and I sat in tons of these meetings, sometimes you are called on to defend why you do something. And you have to give a good answer. I can remember a executive at Ruby's, and he said, Danny, you use company A way too much. Way too much. Okay. Well, we don't need to be doing that. I said, okay. Let me ask you a question. You own a business outside of the company, your family does, and you do a lot of work. You use the very same contractor for every single project that you do. How come? He goes, because they're really good. I said, you just answered my question. That's the reason I'm giving this company the business. They do a
Mhm.
really good job. So it's not, you know, if they get to the point where they have more than they can deliver on a consistent basis, I'll change it. But it's not there. But you're doing the same thing I am, but I'm the one being quit, and so it's like,
Yeah.
oh, and it just kind of stopped. So sometimes you just got to defend, what you're doing and answer the questions because people in the executive always have the ability and to ask anything they want. That's fair. It's fair all day. You just need to be ready with the answer. And if you believe you're right, you got to try to defend it, as best you
And
can.
that's I try to coach my team with, we ultimately want to be an extension of our customers, their FM
Sure.
department. So when you're going into that meeting, one, you don't answer the question if you don't have the answer. Clearly, don't fake it to
Sure.
make it, right? But the
Right.
most important thing is to give them confidence. I tell them, go in with the mindset of don't shoot the messenger
Mhm.
because I am here to serve. And this is what,
Sure.
as an extension of you, this is what I would recommend. And here's why. You don't have to do it, but this is best practice. And this is why we believe. So don't shoot the messenger, right?
Sure.
And it's that
Absolutely.
approach I think works in all business. It's just really making sure you have that customer first mentality and going in with confidence that you want to help them. And this is the solution. And then live by that, right? You have to own it
Absolutely.
and execute on it.
Absolutely. Every day. What? Give me something that you weren't good at in your job or role, but you've
Mhm.
worked really hard on it to improve. Maybe it's not perfect, but from where you started to where you are today, you've made significant improvement.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think thinking back, my first CEO role in 2013, um, I probably took for granted uh, the importance of being a part of a good company culture and what that meant. Because for 24 years, I was developed in a business that was 100 years old, had a very
Hmm.
defined company culture, and they professionalized that family business to a point where it wasn't a cult, but everybody knew how to act, right?
Sure.
And how we did things. And I probably took that for granted. So when I got my first CEO role, that was something that kind of surprised me in a way because I said, wow, I can help the team to define where we're going and the goals to get there, the what we're going to do. It's the how that's always as important as the what. And so,
Sure.
how do you define a company culture? Identify the things that are good about the company and that culture and protect it. And then, how do you bring in and stimulate positivity through defining a company culture that's sustainable and it's linked to the overall strategy? And I think
Sure.
I've been working really hard on that in the last decade um, with outside consultants, bringing them in, but then just being very conscious of the importance of that. Not only helping the team to define it, but trying to model the way.
Sure.
And at SLM, the team after 3 years, it kind of teases me from time to time because I have a saying. It's like get on the CC, and it's an acronym for GETCC, which is our company culture: growth, excellence, trust, collaboration, and customer first. And we define that and we talk about it. Every time we're together in a company wide meeting, I lead with that and I give examples of how we're doing it and what it means for our brand promise to the market. As you get good at that, the customers and our vendor partners should also start to feel it. It's not just inside the building. And I think that's what's exciting about business is when teams can come together under a common vision, but truly have a connection with how to get it done. I think
Sure.
that's really cool. And I've been working on it for over a decade and not as good as I'd like to be on it, but I'm getting there.
There you go. Great answer. How can service providers and operators work together to drive both consistency and also maybe deliver cost savings that's out there?
I think you and I talked a little bit about that already, and that's that measurement thing and getting on the same page with that. I would think that's for us that's the most important. We strive with what gets measured gets done. We have KPIs for every service that we help support to our customers and through our vendor partners. We formulated not only business review meetings, depends on the client. It could be monthly, could be quarterly, depending on their needs, where we're measuring these KPIs and projecting out what the next quarter should look like, how we're trying to get it done. But we also do that on the vendor side, right? So we're getting that alignment with them and what's important. But I think it starts with that because sometimes customers want certain things that other customers don't. So
Hmm.
how do you define that key performance indicator and make sure the whole team's focused on the right thing? It's like when you're measuring things, it's like, so what? Now what? It tells us this. What are we doing about it? And so sometimes I find that companies go overboard on measuring things that, frankly, they're not doing anything with. So let's get on the same page out of the gate on what's important, how we're going to measure it, what good looks like, and then have that cadence going after it. Cost is measured in many different ways. And I think that's something that the restaurant industry is starting to move towards. It's like, yeah, we want to drive costs down, but how is it impacting the customer experience? And where do we make investments where we're freeing up, say, opportunity costs,
Sure.
which is another way of doing it, right? So instead of
Sure.
having managers focusing on stuff that isn't in their wheelhouse and can be outsourced or supported by someone else, how do we free them up to focus on the most important things that are driving the growth of the company and providing great customer experience? I think
Sure.
that's the key.
And I think one simple word that ties into all of that is listen. Listen to
Yes.
your teams, listen to your operational teams if you're a facility manager, listen to your vendor partners, and they will both help you manage better, lead better, and find ways to do things better than you are, and which will result in savings and so on. You have to listen. It can't just be okay. I just got the word from corporate. Here's the deal. That's not how it works. Nobody buys that stuff. Is
Right.
hey, this is my mission. Here's what I'm charged to do. I need your help. What do you think? And then listen to the team and let them be a part of it. Because your
Right.
operators want to be a part of it. They want to tell you, hey, Danny, I don't need to be having my team wash the windows. We need to hire somebody to do that. Okay, maybe that's a good idea. I need to go work on that, and see, is it feasible? Or the vendor partner saying, this is costing a lot of time. We could be better, and it would be better for you if we did this a different way, you know. And why wouldn't you? That's your partner coming
Exactly.
to you saying, there's a way to save some money or save time, which is money, or make it easier on operations, why wouldn't you? And it's all about listening. It's just
You're
listening.
Danny, you're putting in the plug for getting on the CC. That C is collaboration. That's it.
I mean,
It's perfect.
that's it's the way you have to do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Every time.
No, there's an example there that I was just thinking about as you were talking. Um, we provide 24/7 support for our restaurant customers, and there's many times where we'll get that call, and it's emergency. It's emergency. Dispatch, get somebody out here. All right. Well, before we do that, let's troubleshoot online. Is there an alternative here so that we can get it done in the morning and you don't have a overnight cost, time and a half, and all the stuff that goes in? Is there a quick fix to save you the money that's not going to impact the customer experience? You know,
Sure.
but when emergencies are happening, a lot of times we just want get it done, go, go,
Yeah.
go, and it's just taking that time, listening, asking the questions, collaborating, and a lot of times, what is an emergency right now can be fixed tomorrow morning with just a
Sure.
little tweak.
I always would say to restaurants, to managers I talk to them, like, you put in an emergency call for this at 10 o'clock. You close at 11. There's a 4-hour window for the vendor to notify and try to make the call. Are you going to be there at 2 a.m.? No. Well, why'd you put it in at 10 o'clock at night? What if the vendor shows up at 2 a.m. and nobody's there? Well, you would get billed for that.
Yeah.
Why didn't you wait till in the morning, to do that? Or I would tell them, compare it to your house. Do you call your air conditioning company at 2 a.m. and tell them to come? No, you wait till 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning when they open, then you go. Why would you not do your restaurant the same way? And sometimes it just make them aware. Oh, I
Yeah.
just thought I put it in there and then they'll see it the next day. No, they're 24/7. They'll see it and they might come. And if no one's there, that just cost us $200-300 for somebody to
Yeah.
come to the door and there's nobody there. So it's just reminding and teaching. Never miss a teaching moment that you can with your own people to help them.
Especially when people are under stress, right? It's like they want to do the
Yeah,
right thing, but it's an emergency. So we're stressed out. Just slow down. Let's communicate, and we'll get the right solution in place.
sure. What advice would you give to leaders who are evaluating their FM partners today?
I think you know, um, trust is one thing. You can talk
Sure.
about trust, but I mean, at the end of the day, verification, right? You have to verify the trust factor. So, what? How are they going to provide transparency? How are they going to measure the business? I'm a real strong believer in getting references. I know that sounds a little crazy, but because people have said to me over my career, well, references. Hey, Rich, if you give a reference on your resume, you're only giving the people that really love you. So But for our restaurant industry, as large as it is, it's a small network of people.
Yes.
And so if if I'm a restaurateur and I'm getting a reference, I'm going to follow up on that and I'm going to ask the hard questions. We're not all perfect, but you want to get with a partner that's continuously improving and has that mindset that what gets, they're an extension of you, and that's really critical. I would also take a look at what their real coverage is. You know, at SLM, when we're engaging with a client that's a brand that's cutting across the whole industry, depending on the line of service, we'll provide a map coverage for them. We'll show them how we have, say, 3 vendors deep in this geographic area, but in this area we only have one. So we're not as strong in this area. If we're going to come on board with you and you want us to manage it, who are you working with? That we can either share it that way, or you might need another partner to cover that part for that particular line of service. So I think it's all about transparency. And what I've always coached my teams on is you get one chance at this, right? So don't fake it to make it. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important for FM folks to take that same mindset. It's like,
Sure.
get the facts, probe, make sure they got the coverage, make sure that they can follow you 24/7. Can they scale with you? Because you're
Yep.
growing. So
Sure.
that's the key, is there the scale opportunity. And then I would ask them how they would train, how they would help support my team, right? Because as I'm hiring people, as you just said, they're learning too. So
Sure.
will your experts be an extension of my team and help support them in their own development? How does that look
Sure.
like? Those are some of the things that come to mind.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was in RIFMA from day one and until I recently retired. I've told many people I used RIFMA like you use Google. You know, if I'm a chain and I'm working for Ruby Tuesday and I'm taking over a franchisee that wasn't doing well, whatever it may be, in a Midwest part of the country, and I don't have vendors in that network,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just call my competition. I mean, I know them all. I know every one
Mm-hmm.
of them. So I'll call the guy at Brinker. I'll call the guy at Fridays. I'll call the guy at Chipotle, wherever that may be. Hey, man, you're pretty strong in this market. Who do you use? Because that's my verification. Because he or she is going to tell me in the same vein that they've called me in the past and said, I need a guy in New England for this. What do you got? Who do you have? And then you share. But you're not doing trade secrets. You're just talking about vendors. And that opportunity, there's my verification, you know, to go talk to them and see, can it be someone that can help me, you know,
Yeah.
because if my competition's using them, odds are they're probably doing a pretty good job and they can scale and they can do certain things. Okay, why wouldn't I go there first? So that's what I did. I used it as that, and it went both ways. I helped my vendor partners get other business because the more they do and the more healthy their company is, the better they are. Some people's like, why would you ever do that? Why wouldn't I? It makes
Right.
tons of sense. Everybody thinks I got my guy. What you don't take the time to realize is your guy works for 20 other people. They just don't necessarily tell you that, but they do. You know, that's what they do. So, I just use that as a way to kind of, and then what did my gut tell me? I was an old school gut guy. If I sat across the table with somebody for 30 minutes, well, am I feeling right or do I not? And if I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and put it on the table and try to talk about it. If I got a salesman story that didn't add up or didn't sound right or, something, well, I'm going to keep probing, but I went by my gut. What did my gut tell me? And then start them slow and work them up. Don't
Yeah.
hand them a market without evaluating and working through it. Start them with a 20% of the market, see how it goes, and work from there.
I think that's great. The part of me thinks about before we even engage with a vendor. We call them strategic partners because I like what you
Mm-hmm.
just said about helping them. As much as we're an extension of our customers, managing for them being a part of their FM team. We pride ourselves in being an extension of our strategic vendor partners because we're their sales and marketing arm. We got to give them
Sure.
the voice of the customer. We have to make sure that they're understanding what needs to get done, how it needs to get done, but most importantly, how it needs to get done better in the future
Sure.
based on what our customers' future needs are. So I would just want to say to everybody that's listening into this podcast, right? It's like if you're looking for vendors in today's world, because I know we're going to talk about the changes that might be coming, Danny. I,
Mhm.
we really need to look a little longer term before we make that first call to a vendor X.
Sure.
With that service line, where is the industry headed? Where is our company headed in terms of growth? And do we want to make it a core competency where we manage it in house? Or can we align ourselves with a partner
Right.
that can do that
Right.
so we can shift our opportunity to focus on more customer facing issues in our business? I think that's where the restaurant industry is headed. And it's really important because scale is so challenging. We can't have hundreds and hundreds of FM people working on one line of service in a
Sure.
business that's scaling so quickly. So thinking a little longer term when you're before the selection process goes on, I think is important.
Sure. Speaking of that, because the industry is changing and people are changing in it, there's a lot of change, turnover, however you want to look at it,
Yeah,
with facility managers and people out there, and there's a hard focus today on cost. Well,
sure.
I always said I can take out any vendor I have and I can get you someone cheaper. That's easy. Is it better? The question's better. And
Mhm.
many times it's not, but I could do it. I could buy everything in my life at Walmart too. I could, but I'll be buying more of it because it won't last than if I pay a little more money for something else, to have. I could do that. But if you told me I had to change vendors across the board, I could do it. Does that mean I'm going to save you money? Doesn't mean that at all. Initially, it looks like it,
Mm.
but that, three calls at 90 is 270. One call at 200 is 200. I mean, you know, do the math. And there's a reason I'm using certain people. This is what will happen if we make that change. And you just got to talk about it, and then you got to try to
Yeah.
find a balance to it. But speak to the trends of what you see. You mentioned just a tip of it, but in the next 5 years or so, what do you see happening in the industry?
I hope this is a real trend and not just a hope from where I sit. But I am starting to see from some of our customers and the restaurant industry as a whole a little bit more of a focus towards preventative maintenance versus just reactive. And even though that can go counter to cost in the short term, because as you're putting a budget together and you're like, "Whoa, hold on, we're going to go into this preventive maintenance mode." That's money we didn't spend last year. We just fixed it when it broke. Well, putting that in place long term is where the savings comes in, and I think
Sure.
that is a trend that's starting to happen, especially for restaurateurs that are scaling, and they recognize the importance of that. I think that's good for them, the customer experience, but it's also good for the strategic vendors out there, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to get really good at being reactive to something, you have to have reoccurring business in the model
Sure.
to support that kind of approach. So I think that is a trend that I see happening. It's probably been happening before I joined the industry 3 years ago, but I'm really happy to see that uh, the C-suite at these restaurants are starting to look at that stuff much more critically and investing in it. But you can't have a conversation or open up a newspaper or read whatever you read without seeing the rising cost of both labor, the food, and um, how we post COVID get more people back into these restaurants, right? And so I think that trend is going to continue. But the good news, if you really pay attention to this stuff, is I think there's going to be some technology shifts that are going to be able to help support this rising labor cost, and taking some labor out of it. On the FM side, we see the technology moving from just alerting you to the fact that something's happening to actually solving the problem, which
Sure.
is really interesting to see where that might take us over the next 5, 10 years. The other thing is about just the use of AI simply from data mining and predictability and taking a look at these trends. Like you said, give me the top 100 list, right?
Yeah.
In the future, Danny, it's going to be like popping up on your screen saying, "Hey, you got a problem right here."
Sure.
It's like really helping us to make better decisions faster through technology. I think that's definitely coming. Um, but the real shift from the facility being a cost center to being a focus where that's the customer experience, and how does it become a strategic weapon? How does it become a part of the strategy, right? And I think everybody that's out there in the FM world really should be proud about being a part of that transformation, because in the past it was just like behind the scenes, get it done, nobody cares. Well, that's those days are over, I think, and it's really going to accelerate in the future, because the young people that are coming in, they want that good experience. They expect it to be clean, perfect every single time, or they're not coming back.
Sure.
And so
That's
there's a
exactly right.
challenge and a reward with all that stuff. But those are the trends that I see.
I think that's great on the preventive maintenance side. It's always the first thing that, even if you have it, when cost cutting comes, first thing goes. That's the easy cut. All that, just cut it. We won't do it. We'll be fine. What happens is you don't ever get it back. And once it's gone, you don't get it back, and that becomes a problem. The other part is it's always been extremely difficult, and it's getting better as you're speaking about, but it was always hard to go to the C-suite and explain how it saved money because you couldn't show it. It's very difficult to show it. Our oven calls are 20% down. Well, that's because of this or that, not because of PM. I mean, no one equated to that. And so it was always difficult to put numbers to it. But now you have more data, you have more information. The upgrades in the equipment piece, again, as you spoke about, what it does to help the tech. Hey, oh, by the way, before you come, I'm calling in a service call. This is what it's telling me. Maybe they'll help you bring apart whatever you
Yes.
need to do before you come. They'll help getting it up. I think all those things are ways that are better today than years ago and will help, like I said, get equipment back up running quicker because you kind of know what the problem is. And the tech knows before he even leaves kind of what the problems are. And that helps and that keeps your customers. I think it's great. Two more questions I have for you, Rich. Who were
Yeah.
your mentors in your career?
Oh, well, 24 years at Southco. So, I mean, that was my growth journey in the beginning of my career. So shout out to everybody at Southco that I reported to, I worked with, because they were always challenging me professionally, helping me, supporting me, my growth. And some of them to this day, I continue to stay in contact with. They've been my mentors. But, you know, mentorship for me comes in many different forms.
Sure.
I serve currently on two boards, and the people that I work with on those board of directors, they're mentors. We get together, we talk about the business, the owners of those companies. Um, I learn from them, and I try to bring that back into SLM and vice versa. Um, and I think there's this growing trend right now with the younger generation that they want to grow, but they're becoming the mentors for us old timers too. I mean, you
Sure.
sit down and you talk about uh, what what the challenge is, and they can come up with some really creative ways of
Mhm.
solving it. And
Yeah.
so one of the things at SLM that I'm proud of being influential in putting in place when we talk about our culture and G getting on the CC is growth. And for us, that isn't about growing the company. that growth is about professional growth and development. And every person in our entire organization has a professional development goal that myself and the leadership team monitor. And we talk about on a quarterly basis. Like, how is this person doing on that growth goal? How can we help them? And vice versa. And because I just believe that as people are growing in their role, they become more a part of the team. That's what they're looking for. And it pays back. That helps the company to grow. So it's like, it's the double whammy of growth. But mentorship is a really important thing. And I would encourage all young people, especially coming into their career, to have an open mind to finding yourself, people like yourself, Danny, that retired now and still sharing the knowledge and pulling people together. But that's how you can accelerate your profession in any industry, is putting yourself out there, asking questions, and just being inquisitive. Mentorship comes in many ways.
Sure. And mentoring is listening, and then mentoring is offering suggestions. The worst thing you could ever do is, here's what you ought to do. That's the worst thing. You don't say that, but you give them, you ask questions, and based on their answer, you ask more questions, and then you give observations or possibilities or something like that. People don't want to be told what to do. They want to talk to you, and then you give them support, or ideas that they can go work with. That's the way that people mentor. My last question, Rich, I got about 2 minutes here.
Okay.
Give me your
Okay.
go-to saying that drives you every day. What is it?
I'm laughing because the team at SLM could rattle off a couple, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, no doubt. Um, I like the whole, we talked, I mentioned it during this podcast, what gets measured gets done. But I think you have to be beyond that measure. What gets measured gets done. You have to follow up with the so what, now what.
Mhm.
I love that concept of continuous improvement and taking a look at, this is our goal. We didn't come close. We didn't hit it, but that's okay. What are we going to do next? And how do you continue to drive that? I think the saying of, what would the customer want? I think that's so important. And for us at SLM, we're in the middle of the whole value chain, right? We don't self-perform. We're in the middle of it. So who is our customer? One day it could be the restaurant FM person. It could be their procurement team. It could be their accounting team. It could be our strategic partner, the vendor who's out there. It could be somebody in the SLM process is our customer that day. So I really love that saying of, what would the customer do? Because in business, you really need to understand where you sit in the process. It could be your customer is downstream from you in your team, and what they did is impacting what you're doing, and vice versa, and then further upstream in the process. So
Sure.
that whole, what would the customer do, is I think really important in business and in life.
Critical. That's great. Absolutely great. Well, that's my question for today, Rich. Thank you so much for taking the time on the podcast, and hope when everyone listens, you're going to get a lot of good tidbits that Rich talked about today. And wishing you nothing but success at SLM.
Thank
And
you,
I
Danny.
do appreciate. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
I'll make sure I send my regards to Susan when I see her.
Please do. And that's our episode of FM Corner today. Again, brought to you by Windy City Equipment. We appreciate their sponsorship. Thank Rich for taking the time today, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week. Thank you.